Every house has its familiar sounds, the wind brushing through a crack in the door, the floorboards creaking softly in the middle of the night. But sometimes those sounds aren't random. Sometimes they're signs that you're not really alone. Tonight, I'll be sharing 4 true stories, all taking place in homes that were supposed to be safe. From mysterious knocks at the door in the dead of night, to a stranger whispering your name from the darkness. Get ready. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't look behind you. Story 1. The power cut and the man behind the door. One of the most ordinary nights of my life became the moment I realized that sometimes the scariest thing isn't the knock on the door, it's when you don't hear anything at all. It was a chilly night in early March. I'd just gotten home after a long shift. The clock was nearing midnight, and all I wanted was to crack open a cold beer, sink into the couch, and let the world disappear behind the locked door. The house was quiet, too quiet. I didn't turn on the TV. I just closed my eyes, took slow sips from the bottle, and let my thoughts drift. But when I opened my eyes, I started to feel off. The air seemed colder than usual, the silence heavier than usual. Then pop. The entire house went dark. A sharp click followed by that distinct zit sound you hear right before total blackout. Power outages aren't uncommon in my neighborhood, but this one felt different. I stood up, about to head outside and check the breaker. When I tried the front door, I couldn't turn the handle. It was locked from the inside. I live with my wife. She never locks the door when I'm still out. I knocked gently, called her name. No response. No movement. Nothing. I rushed to the back door, also locked. That's when I saw it. Something that shouldn't have been there. The garden hose had been uncoiled, stretched awkwardly across the yard. And lying next to it was the breaker box cover wide open. I froze. My heartbeat spiked. Someone had cut the power. On purpose. I ran back to the front of the house and looked through the living room window. In the faint darkness, I saw 2 beams of light swinging through the room. Not one person. 2. Flashlights bobbing as they rifled through drawers and shelves. They were inside, and my wife was still in there. I checked my pockets, no phone. I'd left it on the couch. I cursed under my breath. No time. I sprinted toward the fence, grabbed a handful of gravel, and started hurling rocks at the bedroom window. After a few throws, the window cracked open. My wife peeked out, still groggy from sleep. I whispered, "Someone's in the house. Hide. Closet. Now. Don't ask." She vanished. I sprinted to the neighbor's house, pounding on the door. They let me borrow a phone and I called 911. By the time police arrived and I led them back inside, it was too late. The back door was wide open, all our valuables gone without a trace. But the part that haunts me the most is what my wife told me afterward. Just seconds after she slipped into the closet, the bedroom door opened. Someone stepped inside. Then the distinct sound of a gun being cocked. He didn't say anything, didn't move. He just stood there, listening. She covered her mouth, trying not to cry, trying not to breathe. Eventually, the footsteps faded. They left. But if I hadn't been outside, if I hadn't seen the signs, if I hadn't warned her in time, I still live in that house. But ever since that night, I've understood one thing. The dark doesn't just hide nightmares. Sometimes, it is the nightmare. Story 2. The voice upstairs that knew my name. I used to think living in the basement would help me avoid trouble. But when the footsteps started echoing from above, I realized I wasn't alone. I had just moved back in with my parents after a few years of struggling on my own. Not my proudest moment, but I needed a reset. Thankfully, they let me stay in the basement, a nearly self-contained unit with a kitchenette TV bathroom, and most importantly, peace and quiet. That night, the rain was pouring hard. The wind howled against the windows. My parents had gone away for the weekend, which meant I had the whole house to myself. There's something oddly calming about lying under a warm blanket, just listening to the rain tapping on the glass. I was nearly asleep when pop, the power went out. I opened my eyes. The room was swallowed in thick, pitch-black darkness. No lights, no sounds except the wind outside. I sighed. Maybe the storm knocked out a line. I almost stayed in bed planning to sleep in the next morning anyway. But then I heard it. Thud. I sat up instantly. The sound had come from the basement window. A heavy, blunt impact like someone had just thrown something large at the glass. I fumbled for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and crept toward the window. The rain was still pounding hard. I rubbed my eyes and looked up, and my heart stopped. A face, pressed up against the glass. A man, pale skin-soaked hair plastered to his face, eyes wide open, staring straight at me. For a split second, our eyes locked. Then he vanished. I stumbled backward, struggling to catch my breath. Before I could even process what just happened, creak. Footsteps from upstairs. I froze. Slow, steady footsteps echoing through the ceiling. They were inside, and they knew I was in the basement. I grabbed my phone. No signal, no Wi-Fi. Just darkness, rain, and strangers inside my house. I tried to stay calm. One thought ran through my mind. Run. Now. I crawled toward the stairs, moving like a cat. Peeking through the crack, I saw them. 3 figures sweeping flashlights through the living room. One of them was holding a gun. I started to back away, but then one of them spoke. "Alex is in the basement. Find him." I froze. How did they know my name? I slid back down the steps, heart pounding like a drum. No hiding spot was safe enough. I had one option. Escape through the basement window. I grabbed a stool, climbed onto the ledge, and slammed my elbow into the glass. The crash of the window shattered through the rain. I crawled out glass, cutting my arm as I squeezed through. The storm hit my face like ice. But I didn't stop. I ran. I ran full speed into the dark. Only a few blocks away did my phone regain signal. I called 911, barely able to speak through the panic. When the cops arrived, the house was empty. They were gone. But I still can't forget the part that haunts me most. How did they know my name? Story 3. The Whisper in the Warehouse. I thought working night security meant sitting around and checking cameras. But that night when the lights went out, and I saw a flashlight drift between the shelves, I realized I wasn't alone. I worked the night shift at a massive warehouse in the industrial district way out past town. It was cold, quiet, and completely empty after 10 p.m. Just me. The job was simple. Make rounds, check the machines, lock the gates. Not a dream gig, but the pay was solid. That night the rain was pouring. I was sitting in the guard room scrolling on my phone when the overhead lights began to flicker. Then snap, everything went black. The whole place was swallowed in darkness. I sighed, grabbed my flashlight and logbook, and stepped into the hallway. Protocol said I needed to check the generators, then head to the circuit room. When it's dark like that, even the smallest sound becomes unnerving. My boots echoed off the concrete floor like gunshots. I was halfway down the line of machinery when I heard it metal crashing at the far end of the warehouse. I froze, then tried to calm myself, probably the wind knocking something loose. I followed the sound, moving past towering shelves of inventory. My flashlight swept across stacked boxes, casting long shadows. And then I saw it. A faint glow. A flashlight beam moving across the rows. I stopped. The light blinked out instantly. I hadn't imagined that. Someone was in the warehouse. I crept toward the spot slowly and quietly. But when I got there, it was empty. Just crates and bare concrete. That's when fear truly set in. I was about to radio the police when a foul stench hit me. Something metallic and wet like rust and sewage mixed together. The smell led me toward the loading bay. I pointed my flashlight at the floor. Wet footprints. Fresh ones. Someone had just walked through. I should have run, but something kept me moving forward, duty, or maybe just stupid curiosity. I followed the footprints carefully. Then I heard it. Whispering. Someone talking. Quietly. So quiet I could barely make it out. But it was real. I turned off my flashlight, held my breath, inched toward the sound heart pounding. When I turned the corner, no one was there. The whispering stopped. Only cold, empty space. I started backing up, shaking now, heading to the circuit room. Just as I reached it, behind me, scrape, a metallic scraping sound. I spun around. A crowbar was lying in the middle of the hallway. It hadn't been there before. No doubt now someone was hunting me. I yelled that I was armed. I wasn't really. Just a small stun gun. Then I ran. Full panic. My boots thudded across the floor as I zigzagged between shelves. I turned the corner. 2 men in black stepped into the aisle. One was holding the crowbar. They stared at me. Then they charged. I bolted, sprinting blind through the maze of crates. I could hear them chasing me, footsteps pounding closer. The warehouse had turned into a death trap, left right behind a pallet. Eventually, the footsteps faded. I crouched, barely breathing, hidden in shadow. When I was sure it was clear, I made my way to the exit. Outside, shaking, I called the cops. They showed up fast. But of course, the warehouse was empty. I still work there. But now every night shift has 2 guards. Not for safety, but because I will never be alone in that place again. Story 4. The voice that knew my name. I'd heard footsteps upstairs before, but what froze me to my core was when one of them called out my name. My name is Alex. Last year, I moved back in with my parents after my small business went under. Not exactly my proudest moment, but it was the only way to get back on my feet. They let me stay in the basement. It was like a tiny apartment down there, kitchenette, bed, TV, even my own bathroom. Private. Quiet. I rarely had to go upstairs. Honestly, I lived like a ghost in my own home. One weekend, my parents went on a trip. I stayed behind, planning to binge old basketball games and sleep in. But that night, a massive storm rolled in. Wind howled through the trees, rain pounded against the tiny basement windows. I was about to turn off my lamp when snap. The power went out. No TV, no Wi-Fi, no lights, just the storm and the dark. I sighed, grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and figured I'd just go to sleep. But then I heard it. Bang. A loud thud at the basement window. I assumed it was a tree branch until I realized it was sharp, solid, and deliberate. I stepped toward the glass and nearly dropped my phone. A man's face was pressed against the window, eyes wide open, hair soaked and hanging limp. He was staring directly at me. Our eyes met for one chilling second. Then he vanished into the storm. My pulse went through the roof. I backed away, stumbling, and that's when I heard it. Footsteps. Upstairs. Inside the house. Someone had broken in. And I was trapped in the basement. No electricity. No phone signal. Wi-Fi was gone with the power. I considered hiding in the closet. But then I heard a voice. Calm. Deep. Coming from above. "Alex, you're down in the basement, aren't you?" My blood ran cold. They knew my name. How it wasn't a guess. They knew exactly where I was. I looked around, panicked. Nowhere to hide. The only exit was the small window, and it was locked. I grabbed a wooden stool, climbed up, and smashed the glass. Crack. I felt it slice my arm, but I didn't care. I climbed through, scraping my legs, slipping in the mud, and ran. The rain was blinding. I sprinted out of the yard onto the street until I finally had cell service. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. I called 911. 15 minutes later, the police arrived. They found nothing upstairs. No signs of forced entry. Just the broken basement window. And a few muddy footprints inside the house. I never got an answer. I don't know who he was or how he knew my name. But I moved out the next day. Because the worst part wasn't seeing that face in the window. It was knowing that someone somehow knew where I was and could have come down those stairs at any moment. You're still listening to this podcast or watching this video, right? Maybe you're lying alone in your dark bedroom. Maybe you're sitting by yourself in a quiet apartment. But before you turn this off and step out of the room, make sure you've locked every single door. And don't forget to check the basement window. If you enjoy true scary stories like this, leave a like, share the video, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you've ever experienced something strange or unexplainable, leave a comment. Because who knows? The next story might be yours.